Yo, yo, yo. Today, guys, I'm making you a tier list following up on my previous video about languages. And so today we're gonna see what are the best languages you could learn in life. Let's get right into it. Question one that I asked myself is how easy is the language to learn? I gave that 3 points. Second question, how many people speak it and how many countries have adopted this language as an official one? 5 points. Third question, what is the political and economic importance in the world of this language? 5 points as well. And finally, this is more like a bonus one, but what is the riz level of that language? 2 points. So without further ado, I say let's get right into it. All right, so just before we start, actually, I should mention that the tier list is made up of 5 parts. S tier being Mr. Worldwide tier, A tier being Polyglot tier, B tier being Continental tier, C tier being Regional tier, and finally we have National tier. So let's just start off with, I don't know, let's say Spanish, right? So first of all, Spanish is not a particularly difficult language to learn. If you speak any other Latin language like French or Italian, then you're going to have a pretty easy time. You also have quite a lot of exposure to it on media, in cinemas, in shows. Maybe you've seen Breaking Bad or Narcos, for example. And although it's nowhere near as much as English, it definitely helps you learn a few words, Adios, gracias, hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista, baby.
And there you go. You already speak Spanish. Secondly, a lot of people speak Spanish in the world. It is indeed the second most spoken language in the world. And over exactly 20 countries have it as an official language, which is huge. So for that, I'm giving 4 points. Next up, politically and economically speaking, Spanish is incredibly important, both in Europe and South America, as well as a bit in the States. So for that, I'm giving it a just clean 4.5 out of 5. And finally, we have the riz level of the language. Spanish is quite a sexy language. If you want to impress some girls, you could opt for Spanish. I'm giving it a solid 2 points out of 2, which puts us at 12.5 points. So I will be putting Spanish in polyglot tier. Next up, we got Hindi. So, while I do not speak Hindi, I've made some research, and well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is a relatively easier language to learn compared to other languages such as Korean or Arabic or Japanese. However, they have their own alphabet called Devanagari, which makes things a bit more complicated. So for that, I will be giving it 1 point for that. Next up, as you know, or may not actually, India has one of the largest populations in the world and make up a big chunk of our planet's population. So Hindi actually has around 600 million speakers, which is absolutely enormous. However, it is recognized as an official language only in India and Fiji, surprisingly, and it is also recognized in the UAE. So I guess technically 3 countries. So for that, 3.5 points. Next up, political and economical context. Well, it is mostly important within the region of India, and besides that, the language is not used that much, neither in business or in politics. So I will give it 3 points because of the sheer demographic amount of Indian and Hindi speaking people. And finally, the riz level is not high at all. Sorry, my Indian brothers, but the accent is not that sexy. So I'm giving it 0 points for that. So we come out with a total of 7.5 points, which will be putting Hindi, in the national tier. Following that, we got German. Easy to learn. Well, German shares quite a lot of vocab with English. Apparently, it's about 40% of the words that are shared between English, making this language quite easy to learn. And structurally and grammatically is not the most complicated one either. I will be giving it 2.5 points out of 3 for that. It has over 155 million speakers, which is quite significant, and 6 countries have it as an official language. So, considering that, I will give it 3.5 points. Next up, politically and economically speaking, Germany is very important, and the language is super important for Europe, especially. And since Germany is a leading economic power, it gains even more importance. And well, that does mean, however, that its influence is mostly within Europe only. So I'm giving it 3.5 points as well for that. Finally, Riz. I think I see German as a kind of like a hit or miss language. What I mean by that is that some people actually find it very nice, like very attractive, actually. And actually, I'm part of these people. Like, I like the German language, the way it sounds. But on the other hand, and I completely get those people, like, it does sound like pretty crazy. Like, if you don't understand the language, it sounds like it sounds barbaric, like.
Mann, Nachher! Ich will am Tournament spielen! Los! Starte das verdammte Spiel!
I have no idea, like, what are they saying? So for that, I will be giving it 1 out of 2 points. I think that's fair enough. So we are left with a total of 10.5 points, which means we'll be putting it at a continental tier. Following that up, we have the cousin of the German language, English. Well, this one's going to be a quick one because, as we all know, first of all, English is quite an easy language to learn, and since we are exposed to it on a daily basis, we kind of learn it just by living, just by existing. We kind of pick up on words in English, so super easy to learn. 3 out of 3 points. It is spoken by a bunch of people. I mean, more than 1.5 billion people speak English, and it is the de facto international language. I mean, the lingua franca, if you will, in the world for conducting business, politics, whatever you want. So it is adopted by everyone. I'm giving it 5 points for that one. Same here. Same with political, economical context. It's just 5 out of 5 points. And Riz, well, I mean, since it's such a common language, it's not particularly impressive when you speak English. However, if you speak it with no accent, if you speak it perfectly, that is quite impressive, and so I'm giving it 1 point. And so we end up with a near perfect score of 14 out of 15 points, which will be putting English straight into the Mr. Worldwide tier. Okay, let's say Korean, for example. So, Korean is not a very easy language to learn. In fact, I would say it's a very difficult language to learn. It has its own alphabet called Hangul, if I'm correct. There's not that much exposure to it, but that has changed in the recent years, for example, with Squid Games on Netflix. So that's changing little by little, and we have K-pop as well. And well, its structure is quite different from other languages, which makes it difficult to learn. So I'm giving it 1 point. Afterwards, we have around 80 million people, according to worlddata.info, that speak it as their mother tongue, which is like quite a significant amount, but nothing crazy either. And it is the official language in only 2 countries, well, South Korea and North Korea. Yeah, duh. I'm giving it 2 out of 5 points for that. Next up, politically and economically, Korea is actually quite important because it is one of the 4 Asian tigers. So it plays a major role in the Asian economy, and culturally it has been much more important recently, these years. And due to the tensions between South Korea and North Korea, which is a conflict that kind of involves the rest of the world, I'm not going to get too deep into that, but for that reason, I do believe that it holds much more importance now, the Korean language, and so I will be giving it 3.5 points out of 5. Finally, we have the Riz level. Well, a lot of women actually have, as you know, crushes on K-pop stars. So I guess if you're into girls like that, well, go for it. Go learn Korean, I guess. If you want to improve your K-pop crush, go for it, my man. And well, I gotta say, like, it's in general pretty impressive if you find someone who speaks Korean. So I'll be giving it 1.5 points for that. And so we end up with a total of 8 points, which means we will be putting Korean in the regional level. All right. Continuing forwards, we have Arabic.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. No. Wait. لحظة. How are you? We are still here.
So, talking about the ease to learn Arabic, it is comparable to Korean, actually. And it is considered one of the hardest languages in the world to learn by English speakers. It also has a separate alphabet called Al-Abjadiyya, if I said it correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And well, we have little exposure in it in our daily lives. Not a lot in media. Maybe besides Dubai, where people seem to be going a lot, we don't have a lot of exposure to it. So I'll be giving it 0.5 point only. Next up, there's actually a lot of people who speak Arabic. According to world data, it's almost 400 million people. And 25 countries have it as an official language, which is huge, huge, huge. I will be giving it 4 points. I will be giving it 4 points just for that. And well, finally for Riz, well, I'm sorry, my Arabic brothers, inshallah, but it's not a particularly sexy language, so 0 points. Sorry. We end up with a total of 8. Actually, I forgot to mention the economical context and political context. My bad. Well, it is absolutely crucial in the gas and oil industry, on which, if you didn't know, the whole world relies. That is a pretty important thing I forgot to mention. So definitely the most important language politically, at least in the Middle East region. And so I'm giving 4 points for that. So we end up with actually 8.5 points, which puts it at a regional level. And I put the Saudi Arabian flag because, well, the Arabic language doesn't have its own flag. So yeah, guys. All right. Then we have French. Well, I'm half French, so I promise I'm not going to be biased. It's just completely unbiased, neutral opinion. All right, maybe not neutral, but unbiased. So, easy to learn. French is not particularly difficult to learn. Besides some words that do not follow the grammar rules and are considered exceptions, it is similar to Spanish or Italian. So, if you know one of these languages, you will probably learn it much quicker. And we have quite a lot of exposure to it in our lives, in media, in movies. Like we see quite a lot of French. So, I'm giving it a solid 2 points for that. Afterwards, there's a lot of people that speak French. According to Rosetta Stone, it is almost or around 320 million people that speak French. And actually, 29 countries have French as an official language, which is honestly mind-blowing. It is absolutely huge. So for that, I will be giving it 4 points. Afterwards, speaking of political and economical context, it is great. It is an important language to know, but its influence remains mostly in Europe and in Africa. So we remain with 4 points, which is a great score. And guys, we have the Riz level. Well, the Riz level is through the roof.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000! What, 9,000?
I'm giving it 2 points out of 2. I would give it 2.5 if I could, but yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. Hands down, the highest Riz on the list. So this puts us a solid 12 points out of 15, which means it goes into the continental level. Okay, afterwards, we got Mandarin. So Mandarin is one of the toughest languages to learn. It seems to take around 4 to 7 years of consistent practice to become fluent in this language, which is a lot. And they have their own alphabet called Hanzi, apparently. So only half a point for that, for ease to learn. It is the most spoken language in the world, with over 1 billion people who speak Mandarin. So literally a very solid chunk of our planet's population speak Mandarin, just this one language. For that sheer fact alone, I will be giving it 5 points out of 5. Politically and economically speaking, it is an incredibly important language for business and a bit less for politics. Well, as you may know, the Chinese, China is just booming as a country and may or may not overtake the States in the future. For now, not the case yet, but it is without a shadow of doubt, a country that is growing at a very fast pace. And business opportunities are very interesting if you learn Chinese. So for that, I will be giving it 4 points. Now, Riz-wise, it's not a particularly phonetically sexy language.
雪花飘飘，北风萧萧.
But it is impressive if someone speaks Chinese, so I will give it 1.5 points, which will be putting us at 11 points, which puts us at a polyglot tier. Oh, and by the way, this means that French goes into polyglot tier as well. I'm not biased, I promise, guys. Italian. It's not a particularly difficult language to learn, It's about the same level as French or Spanish, so it might be actually even a bit easier because some people who learn Latin, for example, they will have an easier transition into Italian. And, for that, I'm just giving it 2.5 points, just like solid points. There's not that many people who speak Italian, actually. Around 60 million people, according to world data. So it's not that much, and only 4 countries have it as an official language. And actually, Croatia and Slovenia apparently have it in some regions of the countries, made as an official language. So I guess you could say 6. But that gives us 3 out of 5 points. Politically and economically, it is a key language in European business and politics. And I'm giving it an extra half point for its cultural importance. Pizzas, coffee, pasta, that's all you need to know. So we end up with 3. Finally, Riz level, also very high Riz level.
Buongiorno.
Signori, piacere. Gli amici della vedetta ammirata da tutti noi, questa gemma propria della nostra cultura, saranno naturalmente accolti sotto la mia protezione per la durata del loro soggiorno.
Grazie.
3. Finally, Riz level, also very high Riz level. We'll definitely impress the ladies with it, giving it 2 points. And so we end up with 10.5 out of 15. So Italian goes into the continental tier. Next up, we have Japanese. It's easy to learn, it's quite a difficult language to learn. It's one of the most difficult languages, as well as with Korean and Arabic. And also another reason why it's so difficult is because it has 3 alphabets: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. So that makes it a ton more difficult. And actually, fun fact, the alphabet is so difficult, the kanji one at least, that some native speakers, do not even recognize some of the symbols. So yeah. However, we do have a lot of exposure to Japanese through anime and manga. So in my case, for example, I was learning Japanese for 2 years with a teacher. Learned quite a decent amount. I learned how to read hiragana and a few kanji. That's the best I could do. Managed, to get to a decent level where I could maybe like hold like a decent like conversation. And well, this all started with anime to me. And actually, it's still going with anime because that's how I maintain my level in Japanese. So yeah, for that reason, we are giving it an extra point because of the cultural importance. We end up with 4 points. Finally, Riz level. Well, it's a phonetically pleasing language, and it's impressive if you speak it. So 1.5 points, which will put Japanese at a regional level with 8.5 points. Next up, Portuguese. It's apparently one of the easiest languages to learn. It has some Latin roots, which means it shares some similarities with Spanish in particular, maybe a bit with French and Italian, but mostly with Spanish. So if you speak Spanish, it will be easier for you to learn it. So I'm giving it 2 points on ease to learn. It's spoken by a lot of people, 260 million people approximately. And fun fact, a Portuguese speaker is called a lusofono or lusophone. And well, it is spoken as an official language in 11 countries. There's like the official languages and the co-official languages, but I just count them as official languages. Let's not get too complicated with that stuff. So I'll be giving it 3.5 points. Then don't forget that politically and economically, it is quite important because we have Brazil, Portuguese-speaking country, making up a huge chunk of South America. So anything that is related to South American politics, well, Portuguese is like absolutely crucial. And same with the economy. And there's obviously a decent importance of it in Europe as well. So we end up with 4 points, 3.5 points, my bad, with that. And well, Riz-wise, it's a pretty sexy language, 1.5 points. So yeah. So with that being said, we will be putting Portuguese in the continental level. Okay, so the final language is Russian. Russian is not a particularly difficult language to learn, but it has a different structure from most languages, and they have their own alphabet called the Cyrillic alphabet. So I was learning Russian in high school, and learning the Cyrillic alphabet was a bit of a challenge, but it wasn't as hard as learning the hiraganas, katakanas, and kanjis like in the Japanese language, for example. So since it's not as difficult, I'm giving it 1.5 points out of 3. It is spoken by 260 million native speakers plus 120 million non-native speakers. And you'll see that a lot of former Soviet countries, at least the older population, they all speak Russian. So it could be an interesting perk to learn the language. It has surprisingly only 4 official countries that speak Russian. And also it is widely spoken in Ukraine, but it is not an official language there apparently. So for that, I'm giving it 3 points. Afterwards, politically and economically, it is highly important among former Soviet countries. And besides that, it's not used that much, but since it's quite a significant amount of countries, including, for example, Lithuania, where I'm from, I can tell you that it's quite significant, so I'm giving it 3 points. Finally, Riz level 1, it can be considered a sexy language, but also sometimes not so much, so 1 point. And so that ends up with a total of 8.5 points, which means I will be putting it in the regional level. So I hope you enjoyed it, guys, and yeah, see you later. Bye-bye.